Hello and welcome viewers, I am Pia and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated that troops are organizing for a major ground maneuver into Gaza City. Meanwhile, the United Nations has condemned civilian killings, warning of food and water shortages and calls for protection of displaced people across Gaza. The Israeli Foreign Minister has suggested that European countries should establish a Palestinian state on their own territory. This comes as UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer has welcomed Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas to Downing Street and has reaffirmed support for state recognition ahead of the UNGA meeting. Thailand's Supreme Court has ordered former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra to be taken to jail. The court has stated that he partially caused his prolonged hospital stay and knew that he had no severe illness. It also ruled that his hospital time will not count towards jail time, noting that his previous sentencing was improperly carried out. Chinese President Xi Jinping has met Portuguese Prime Minister, expressing willingness to strengthen strategic communication and cooperate on safeguarding the global free trade system. Meanwhile, Portugal is urging Xi Jinping to leverage China's close ties with Russia to push for peace in Ukraine. In the United States, Democrats have released a letter allegedly signed by US President Donald Trump to spend to Jeffrey Epstein, which Trump now denies. He's called the report false and defamatory and has filed a $10 billion lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal. Venezuela's defense minister has warned of heightened vigilance over US forces in the Caribbean. Meanwhile, its vice president has accused Washington of seeking to criminalize the government rather than combat crime. This comes as Pete Hegseth is visiting a US warship following the fatal strike on a Venezuelan vessel. French Prime Minister François Bayrou has lost his confidence vote in Parliament amid warnings of life-threatening national debt. This has deepened political crisis and has handed President Emmanuel Macron the task of appointing the country's fifth Prime Minister in under 2 years. Norway's minority Labour government has secured a second term while the populist right has achieved its best ever election result. Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre and allies have won 87 seats, facing challenges on tax policy and oil exploration. Well, those are the headlines and our top focus. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar has criticized European countries, including Spain and France, for their support of a Palestinian state. During a conference in Budapest alongside his Hungarian counterpart, Saar has stated that if European nations are quote-unquote so enthusiastic to establish a Palestinian state, they could do so in their own territory. Let's take a closer look at what he said.
We will not allow the Palestinian Authority, with the aid of foreign countries, to dictate or to determine the final status of disputed territories between us and the Palestinians. It's an illusion to think that the future of Judea and Samaria, the cradle of the Jewish people, will be determined in Paris, in Madrid, or in Brussels. It will be determined only in.
This comes as Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer has met with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas at Downing Street. Now, according to a spokesperson at Downing Street, Abbas welcomed Starmer's pledge to recognize a Palestinian state ahead of the United Nations General Assembly later this month. Now, Britain, along with France, Canada, Australia and Belgium, plan to recognize this Palestinian state at the UNGA, and the move is intended to pressurize Israel to end its assault on Gaza City and halt new settlements in West Bank. However, London has also reportedly indicated that it could halt the recognition process if Israel improves the humanitarian situation in Gaza and commits to a long-term peace process. With us on the broadcast is Shruti Dasgupta, international affairs expert, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. As I've highlighted earlier, several European countries have come forward stating that they will be recognizing a Palestinian state at the upcoming UNGA. Now, it seems that Israel has reacted rather sharply, stating that EU nations could carve out a Palestinian territory on their own soil, rather than looking in light of this exercise of them recognizing the state later this month. What is your reaction to what the Israeli foreign minister has stated?
I'd like to add to his statement, if you permit me, Pia. Thank you for inviting me. I'd like to add that why not ask the other Arab nations in the Middle East to accommodate the Palestinians when they are so hell-bent of ensuring justice for Palestine, or at least in the name of Palestine, and while bowing to the Hamas mousetrap and pressure tactics. So I understand his frustration when the West bows low and says they will allow asylum seekers, they will interfere in how the entire conversation and narrative around the Palestinian cause goes. So his frustration is obvious through the statement and mostly justified. Unfortunately for him, his government also happens to be committing a large amount of undocumented as well as unconfirmed acts, which may lead to human rights violations. So his government doesn't have moral feet to stand on. They don't have moral high ground. And the only thing that comes through from this statement, in fact, is that he's upset with how the Western powers are trying to meddle into Middle East politics. But that's not new. That has always happened. That is exactly how Israel was created, when a Western power like Britain created space for the Jews in that particular zone. So his frustration is obvious and understandable. But I would also like the world to understand that there are large swatches of land in the Middle East itself. Why couldn't they be accommodated there? And why is the insistence of asking for this particular space to be given to them on the Western shores?
Also, and I wanted to understand from you, what are your expectations from the UNGA later this month at large? We do know that the US is still backing Netanyahu, although Trump has come out and stated that he's given a last warning to Hamas to accept a ceasefire deal. But in case that does not take place, do you still think that Trump is going to continue backing Israel? He's going to let Netanyahu operate with a free hand?
Well, I do think that their interests combine as far as the Gaza Strip is concerned. So they will continue to support him. He has issued a last warning, to which I don't see any peace talk coming through, because one of the clauses which I've heard from report to report is that an Arab administration is acceptable, no Palestinians. So the Palestinian Authority president, who's meeting Keir Starmer currently, is supposed to be is wanting access to administrative role there, which they're not going, which Israel is against. And also, whoever is going to be, whichever Arab world is going to help in forming an administrative capacity, Israel is not going to back off. IDF will not withdraw until and unless they are sure that the new government is able to control the security situation in that region. So that is a giant clause to which Hamas is not accepting or signing off on. And the other part is that I believe, this is again from report to report on open source media, that they're saying that Hamas is unable to access some of the bodies of the dead as the region continues to be under IDF attack, and hence they are unable to do a complete hostage exchange. So the Witkoff proposals, the Trump warnings might actually come to fruition, and they will see a larger scale war before the UNGA, probably to put an end to this situation and put an end to the entire question altogether, whether Palestine and Gaza get this recognition or not.
All right, ma'am. With that, I would like to thank you for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World, sharing your insight as to what we can expect to take place next in the Middle East. Meanwhile, viewers, shifting focus to France, we're now learning that the French Parliament has voted to topple the government over plans to address the country's ballooning national debt, deepening a political crisis and leaving President Emmanuel Macron with the task of appointing a fifth Prime Minister in less than 2 years. Prime Minister François Bayrou, who took office 9 months ago, must now tender his resignation. He had called the confidence vote to seek support for his plan to reduce a deficit nearly double than the European Union's 3% ceiling and to begin tackling a public debt equivalent of 114% of the GDP. Now, opposition parties in France refused to back Bayrou's proposed savings of 44 billion euros for the next year, with an election for Macron's successor due in 2027. Macron could now nominate a member of his centrist minority or choose a conservative, but this would mean continuing a strategy that has failed to secure a stable alliance. Now, in his final speech to the French Parliament before being ousted, Bayrou has defended his government, calling it honorable and active. Listen in.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Je trouve qu'on a montré une image républicaine, honorable et active. Et donc de ce point de vue-là, je voulais, au nom du gouvernement, remercier l'Assemblée nationale et en tant que Premier ministre, remercier les membres du gouvernement. Je suis frappé par les messages que nous tous nous recevons d'une minute à l'autre et ces messages sont des messages profondément heurtés par la violence des propos et c'est le cas exactement pour l'ensemble de la vie politique. Je trouve que si nous pouvons, par notre attitude, essayer de sortir de cette image de violence et de mépris, nous rendrions service à la démocratie que nous défendons.
Now, ahead of the vote, left-wing lawmaker Mathilde Prévost had stated that Bayrou's departure should be followed by Macron, adding that the president does not wish to change his policies. Meanwhile, citizens in Paris and other cities have reacted to the government's fall. Nearly 1,000 people, in fact, gathered in front of the city hall in rain for a farewell event for Bayrou, while demonstrators in Pau celebrated his removal in the confidence vote. Take a look.
J'étais pas au courant en fait. Et je me suis dit mais quelle bonne idée d'aller fêter le départ de Bayrou. Surtout que voilà, c'est bien 364 votes, je crois que c'est clair. Donc là il y a pas photo sur cette histoire-là qui est complètement folle par rapport à ce qui se passe quand même. On est en pleine crise politique et on a l'impression que les politiciens sont complètement à côté de la plaque. Et je pense
pas. Je pense qu'on va avoir encore un recommencement, sauf que c'est toujours une bonne chose de passer une étape. C'est toujours une bonne chose de tourner une page. Voilà. Donc c'est plus symbolique qu'autre chose en fait. Donc, voilà, j'ai pas spécialement d'attente concrète de ça. Voilà, j'attends de voir ce qui se passera déjà après mercredi, ainsi qu'après la nouvelle nomination.
Alors que l'Assemblée ait voté contre, ça c'était prévisible de toute façon. Hein. Quand vous écoutez les chefs de parti en parler, c'était prévisible. Maintenant, il va sa démission, qui pour le remplacer déjà? La France, tout part à volo. Franchement, c'est pitoyable, hein, un pays comme la France. Mais bon.
Je suis assez... Moi, c'est la première fois que je vois ça dans l'histoire de la politique française. Et j'ai toujours du mal à comprendre la toute première dissolution qui a été donc, lancée par le président de la République, qui a donné lieu à un vote. Et le nouveau Front populaire l'a emporté sur ce vote avec les pourcentages qui étaient assez clairs. Et pourtant, un Premier ministre qui n'était pas du tout de ce bord politique a été nommé. Puis un deuxième qui n'est toujours pas de ce bord politique. Et il semble qu'à chaque fois, le gouvernement pousse un Premier ministre qui en fait ne correspond pas au vote qui a été donné, alors même qu'eux-mêmes ont commencé la dissolution au départ. Donc j'ai toujours du mal à comprendre, enfin je ne suis pas très surpris que Bayrou finisse par être, ne pas avoir la confiance de l'Assemblée. moi, il me semble que ce serait naturel d'avoir un Premier ministre qui corresponde à ce qui a été voté pendant les législatives anticipées après la première dissolution, quoi.
All right, we are shifting focus to Thailand. We're now learning that Thailand's Supreme Court has ordered former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra to serve 1 year in prison and has ruled that his prolonged hospital stay last year was unlawful and cannot be counted as time served. Thaksin, who served as Prime Minister from 2001 until he was ousted in a military coup in 2006, returned from 15 years of self-exile in 2023 and spent only a few hours in prison before being transferred to a VIP hospital. He was in fact sentenced to 8 years for corruption and abuse of power after returning to the country in August 2023, following the 15 years spent living in exile. However, his sentence was reduced to 1 year by a royal pardon and he was freed in an early release scheme for elderly prisoners. The court has now found that he was partially responsible for prolonging his hospitalization despite not having a severe illness and has now issued the warrant to take Thaksin to Bangkok remand prison in order to begin serving a 1-year prison term. His daughter, Thaksin Shinawatra, who was also dismissed as Prime Minister last month on the 29th, in fact spoke to the media after the court verdict today. Listen in.
จนมาวันนี้ก็เป็นประวัติศาสตร์อีกเรื่องหนึ่งนะคะที่มีนายกรัฐมนตรีคนแรกที่จะต้องจำคุกนะคะเรื่องนี้ก็อาจจะค่อนข้างหนักนิดนึงนะคะแต่ว่าแน่นอนค่ะว่ากำลังใจดีทั้งคุณพ่อและครอบครัวค่ะที่ตัวดิฉันเองและครอบครัวก็มีความเป็นห่วงคุณพ่อค่ะแต่ว่าก็รู้สึกภูมิใจนะคะที่คุณพ่อก็ได้สร้างประวัติศาสตร์มากมายในประเทศไม่ว่าจะเป็นนโยบายที่มีประโยชน์อย่างมากสำหรับ
Walking out of court was another Thai lawmaker who shared some details about Thaksin's response to the court ruling. Take a look.
ขออนุญาตเริ่มเลยนะวันนี้ศาลฎีกาแผนกคดีนักการเมืองก็ได้มีคำพิพากษานะครับว่าให้ท่านกลับไปติดคุกในเรือนจำ1 ปีเป็นการนับหนึ่งใหม่นะครับเรื่องนี้พวกผมเองก็เคารพในคำวินิจฉัยของท่านนะครับก่อนที่ผมลงมาก็ได้มีโอกาสพูดคุยกับท่านทักษิณชินวัตรนะครับท่านเองก็มีสีหน้าปกตินะครับยิ้มสู้แล้วก็บอกพวกผมว่าไม่เป็นไรนะครับท่านกลับมาท่านก็พร้อมที่จะเผชิญหน้ากับทุกสถานการณ์ไม่ว่ายามสุขหรือยามทุกข์
This court verdict marks a major turning point for the Shinawatra family, which has influenced Thai politics for more than 2 decades. In fact, the Shinawatra political clan has been the key foe of Thailand's pro-military, pro-royalty elite, who view the populist brand as a threat to traditional social order. However, we do now see the dynasty's momentum is flagging after a litany of legal and political setbacks, most notably and recently with Thaksin Shinawatra's ouster as the Prime Minister. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Ross Feingold, political analyst, joining us from Taipei. Thank you for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. As I've mentioned, we've been seeing the power of the Shinawatra clan waning over the years. Thaksin Shinawatra is now being sentenced to 1 year in jail. We did see his daughter Thaksin being ousted as Prime Minister last month. His sister Yingluck is in exile. So what in your assessment is next for the Shinawatra family itself?
Well, first we'll have to see how long Thaksin Shinawatra actually spends in jail, whether or not there'll be an release again. But we should also keep in mind that he's enormously wealthy. So money, of course, is an important factor in politics. Candidates for office need financial support, and he still retains the ability to provide that kind of financial support. And also over his 25 years as a key figure in Thai politics, he's built up an enormous amount of both personal popularity as well as allegiance with politicians at different levels of government around the country. So there's a lot of support, again, not just with voters, but with politicians as well, politicians who have supported the various iterations of the Shinawatra family's political party. So I would not say they're finished. The only thing that would bring us to say that they're really out of politics is if the whole family leaves Thailand when Thaksin Shinawatra finishes his current term in jail. But that it's premature to make that assessment. So frankly, I would say for now, at least, they still might retain influence and be a force in Thai politics.
Indeed, and we've been seeing Thai politics itself being in quite a flux over the last couple of years. Successive years have seen a number of prime ministers come in and out of power. But what, in your assessment, is next for the party, the Pheu Thai party at large?
They'll probably lose some of their influence if they're not part of the ruling coalition with the new prime minister who just took office, but much will depend on the next election. There's expectation of a snap election in the coming months. And if that does happen, chances are that they're still going to retain support and win a lot of seats in Thailand's parliament. And then we'll be back to that same situation where the parties are going to have a lot of back and forth about forming a coalition, and it remains to be seen whether or not they would form or be part of the coalition, or they would be boxed out by other parties who at this point want nothing to do with Pheu Thai. Keeping in mind, I mean, not just that Thaksin Shinawatra was removed by the court, but it's also the circumstances where the leaked phone call with Hun Sen of Cambodia reflected her criticism of the Thai army, and that just didn't go down well with a lot of people in Thailand. So they might win a lot of seats, but they might not be welcomed into a coalition in the future.
All right, so with that, I would like to thank you for taking our time, sharing your perspective on NewsX World. We are shifting focus to more news coming in. We're now learning that Portugal's Prime Minister Luís Montenegro has urged Chinese President Xi Jinping for using his country's close relationship with Russia to push for a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. This happened during his meeting with Xi in Beijing. Now, his visit to China is the first of a Portuguese head of government in nearly a decade. It comes a week after Xi Jinping had hosted a massive military parade in Beijing, marking the end of the Second World War, as well as the SCO summit. Present over there were Russian President Vladimir Putin, as well as North Korea's Kim Jong-un, and EU's foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas had called it an autocratic alliance. Now, after a multi-day visit to China, he will head to Japan for a state visit, as Lisbon is seeking closer ties with Asia's large economies after years of no high-level contact. Now, US President Donald Trump's administration's tariffs have hit hard as it slashed Portugal's US-bound exports. Lisbon is now seeking stronger commercial ties with China, even if the European Union is accusing the world's second-largest economy of flooding the region with cheap goods and enabling Russia's economy at large. With us on the broadcast is Mr. William Yang. He's an analyst joining us from Taipei. Thank you for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. What do you make of Portugal's moves? We've seen contradictory statements come in from the EU foreign policy chief. European leaders have been quick to criticize the SCO summit that has taken place in Tianjin. They were also quick to criticize the large parade that was held, the fact that Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un were both present over there. So what do you make of this outreach by the Portuguese president? Prime Minister, I beg your pardon.
I think this shows that there are still some European leaders who believe in the ability from China to actually exercise some influence over Russia, because as they see as of now, they recognize the big influence that China has over Russia, at least when it comes to being the largest lifeline, economic lifeline to Russia, and also the most important provider of some of the important dual-use technologies and products that Russia needs to continue to power its war machine against Ukraine. So I think for some European leaders, they still see the need to at least nudge China, if not completely believing in Beijing's willingness to actually play a role in really leaning in and put some pressure on Russia to enter into a peace talk. But I think this also just shows that there is now a clear division and very little consensus among all the 27 member states of the European Union. And that's likely going to be a challenge going forward when Europe wants to have a united front to continue support Ukraine in the ongoing process of trying to enter into a very complicated peace talk.
Speaking of the war that's taking place between Russia and Ukraine, we've recently seen Russian drone and missile strikes take place in Kiev. The US President Donald Trump has reacted to these strikes, threatening sanctions against Russia. In fact, some of his advisors have gone a step forward. His Commerce Secretary, as well as close advisors such as Peter Navarro, have also come out and called for heightened tariffs, sanctions against countries that are funding Russia. They've pointed towards China. They've also pointed towards India. As far as this matter is concerned, do you think Trump will heed their advice, or will he focus solely on Russia?
I believe due to the fact that Trump personally wants to continue to prioritize the ongoing trade negotiation and also the efforts to try to set up a summit with President Xi Jinping. That's why he personally has been putting off or postponing the decision of also sanctioning China for both purchasing Russian oil and also providing support for Russia. And I think as long as the US did not begin to impose secondary sanctions on China, any type of sanction that is directly targeting Russia or other countries, including especially India, is likely going to only have limited impact, because as we know, China's role in this whole no limits partnership for Russia has become more and more decisive and important to allow Russia to continue to have the capacity to launch attacks on Ukraine while the international community is trying to push for a potential peace talk.
All right, with that, I would like to thank you for taking our time, joining us on NewsX World, sharing your perspective on these key developments. Viewers tracking more news coming in, we're now learning that Chinese President Xi Jinping has sent a congratulatory message to North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un on the 77th anniversary of the country's founding. Xi Jinping has stated that China is ready to strengthen strategic communication and maintain close cooperation with North Korea to promote peace and development in the region as well as the world. The message comes after Kim Jong-un had earlier traveled to Beijing in order to attend the massive Chinese military parade alongside Xi and Russian President Vladimir Putin, signaling strong diplomatic ties between the nations. Shifting our focus to Norway, we're now learning that Norway's minority Labour Party government has won a second term in power, while the populist right achieved its best ever election result. The official results have shown that in a ballot dominated by concerns over rising living costs and wars in Ukraine and Gaza, it is a successful re-election for the Labour Party government. Now, incumbent Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre's Labour and four smaller left-leaning parties have won 87 seats, which is well above the 85 mark which is needed for a majority with 99% of the ballots counted. Let's in fact listen in to what he had to say.
Vi visste at det kom til å bli tøft, og det ble tøft. Vi visste det kom til å bli jevnt, og det ble jevnt. Og vi visste at vi måtte gi alt, og vi ga alt. Derfor det fantastisk å stå sammen med dere og si at vi klarte det! Vi skal innføre Norgespris på strøm. Og så lenge Arbeiderpartiet styrer, så garanterer vi historisk lave priser for barnehagene. Og for det andre, vi skal sørge for mer lesing og mindre skjermbruk, så barna våre lærer mer i skolen. Vi skal sette en 15-års aldersgrense på sosiale medier. Vi skal få flere i jobb.
Sawyer will remain heavily reliant on his small allies to pass major legislations such as the fiscal budget. In order to get their backing, he will likely face tough decisions over issues such as tax hikes for the wealthy, future oil exploration, and divestments from Norway's $2 trillion sovereign wealth fund from Israeli companies. Let's in fact listen in to what some of the other members had to say.
The same system where we had a minority Labour Party government that negotiated in the parliament. And I'm confident that will work also this time, not least because the Labour Party is so strong. More than 28%, by far the strongest party. That provides us with the basis, the strength we need to continue to govern the country.
Jonas Gahr Støre will make a difference. More people will have more money in their pocket. And I think the young people will see that we are seen.
And I am very positive that we are going to get a broad coalition with a majority on our side.
So with this very strong position from the Labour Party, it's a wonderful, wonderful situation.
All right, viewers, shifting focus to more developments coming in. We're now learning that the United Nations has expressed deep concern over recent clashes in Nepal, urging authorities to protect the rights of peaceful assembly and freedom of expression. This comes after the KP Sharma Oli-led government has lifted its ban on social media platforms following deadly protests that left at least 19 people dead and over 300 injured. The UN has also called on security forces to follow basic principles on the use of force and has stressed upon the importance of dialogue between the government and demonstrators as well. They've also highlighted the fact that Nepal enjoys a vibrant democracy. Meanwhile, Nepal's neighboring country, India, is monitoring the situation very closely. It has expressed condolences to the victims' families and have wished a speedy recovery for the injured. It's also urged for restraint and peaceful resolution, advising its nationals in Nepal to follow local guidelines. All right, viewers, that's all the time we have for this bulletin. More news and updates on the other side. We'll be back after a quick short break.